Welcome, everyone, to our fourth session of Vedanta Treatise, the Eternities. And this week, we're going to be discussing adapting to adversity. So in the previous sessions, we spoke about analyzing the individual. And we spoke about the individual mechanism, how we can improve ourselves in terms of being conscious of the stimuli that we receive, being conscious of our reaction, our processing. So we definitely want to spend some time investing in rehabilitating the quality of our emotions, developing the clarity and strength of our intellect. And as far as responses go, our actions, what type of action are we performing? And the quality control is the action giving us peace or agitation? If it's giving us agitation, we've got to go back, work on the stimuli, improve the raw product. What is the quality of stimuli we're receiving? And get our intentions right. Is it selfish or unselfish? If it's unselfish, you cannot be agitated. In today's session, we talk about the nature of the world. And according to the nature of the world, once we analyze it, how best to relate to it. The nature of the world is that it is in constant flux change. This is the nature of the world. This one line, this one assessment, the nature of the world, that the world is constantly changing, we could spend hours on this one line alone. And no doubt you've heard about it. We've heard phrases such as, the only thing certain is uncertainty. The only constant is change. We've heard this, but have we really digested it? What does it mean for something to be constantly changing? And with our relationship with the world, have we assessed this and adapted accordingly? So let's go point by point. In the scriptures, another description of the world is called dvandvas. D-V-A-N-D-V-A-S, dvandvas. And what it means is pairs of opposites. Exactly this. The world is change. It is pairs of opposites. There's heat, and then there's cold. There's summer, there's winter. There is good, there is bad. There's joy, there's sorrow. In fact, one could reason that you actually do not understand good without bad, or day without night. We need both. Imagine if you go to the sun and you could have a conversation with Mr. Sun. You say, you know, Mr. Sun, last night I had a dream. And the sun would be, what are you talking about? Because the sun doesn't have nights. We need to see the other side to understand the other opposite. How do you describe the height of a dog? Is it short or is it tall? It's all relative. This is the world. And when we start dealing with the more abstract, intangible, more difficult ones, where there is birth, there is death. This is change. But how do we relate to the world? How do we relate to change? We don't accept it. Going back to our diagram of the body, mind, and intellect, we relate to the nature of the world with the mind. So we take one of the pairs of the opposites and we get attached to it. We desire one of the pairs, not both the pairs. We like one of them. We like summer, not winter. We like good, not bad. We like joy, not sorrow. But this is not life. Life is both. Life is both sides. Life is change. Life is constant. We get attached. So this is what I'm saying. It's just that one line. The world, its nature is change. But yet our mind wants to get attached to one aspect. We want to make it changeless. We want the world to fit into a pattern that we like. It cannot, because it's changing, fluctuating, rotating. How many of you celebrate birthdays? Anyone? Yeah. What are you celebrating, really? The fact that you survived up to this age? What is the need, or the, if anything, it's a congratulations to your parents, your mother, your parent. What are you celebrating? But okay, let's say we celebrate birthdays. We can remove the diagram now. Thank you. We celebrate birthdays. How many of you celebrate death days? You celebrate the day you're born. Everybody was crying on that day. You were crying, your mother was crying. Do any of you celebrate death days? No, we don't. Some do. There was a funeral in Switzerland where the lady had given very clear instructions. She wanted gospel singings. She wanted people to be happy. She had dances. And all this is going on as if it's a parade. And in the middle of the parade, they're carrying a coffin into the chapel. People were smiling, were laughing. They were talking about how she's been like this throughout her life. They turn something that is usually conventionally sad into something positive. Now, this is what the mind does. It takes aspects that it likes, birthdays, and it builds a world around that birthday, or it builds around its world around that joy or that achievement, but it does not prepare, doesn't even consider the other side. So for most, death is always a surprise. Really? I can't believe it. Passed away? How old was he? 113. Is it such a surprise? In fact, if we are philosophical and we look at life, the moment a person is born, the moment you and I are born, we are subject to change. We are subject to death. This is not pessimistic. This is a fact. So as a philosopher, how do you take that in? You prepare for it. You understand that there is a probability of it. And if you are prepared for it, your suffering will be less. Your preparation and fear of it will be less. But because we don't want it, the mind doesn't like it, doesn't even want to think it's blasphemous even to say aloud. So how can you talk about death in a public platform like this? Aren't we all going through it? Haven't we all lost loved ones? Won't we also make part? When it comes to different aspects of life, we find ourselves taking out insurance. So we take out insurance on our car. We take out insurance on our homes. We took out insurance on COVID. There's COVID insurance when you travel. We take travel insurance. I'm asking you, Debbie, Do you mean to meet in an accident? Why are you taking out car insurance? It's not that you deliberately drive recklessly or you're courting trouble, but you're prepared that there's always a possibility that there could be an accident. And you take out the insurance for something happening so that if there was something to happen, you would be okay, your family would be okay, the loss is mitigated. So we're doing this for a home, in case there's a fire or a flood, etc. We're doing this for so many aspects. How come we don't do it for living? How is it that we're not prepared mentally, emotionally for divorce, illness, heartbreak, disease? Isn't this part and parcel of life? And you might say, look, doesn't that make you sorrowful? Doesn't that make you negative when you look at the other side? It's not that you're constantly looking at the other side. It's preparing for it. Does anyone know the difference between a pessimist and a philosopher? So feel free to unmute and speak. Pranay, you don't speak. You have a sore throat. What is the difference between a pessimist and a philosopher? Yes, Vasu.
I think a pessimist always looks for problems, while a philosopher looks for solutions.
Good one. Anyone else? So a pessimist feels like the negative thing is going to happen all the time. So they're constantly expecting that eventuality. They're constantly expecting an accident. They drive as if an accident is going to happen anytime. A philosopher is prepared for that eventuality, prepared for death, prepared for an accident, prepared for illness. Having prepared works for the best. So the difference is one is constantly expecting, the other is prepared and working for the best. This is a philosopher, understands the nature of the world is change, anything can happen. And am I ready for that anything? There's a poem which we may study later on in these classes. Even this shall pass away, by Theodore Tilton. And it talks about a king of Persia. And with all his riches, he keeps on reminding himself, these riches could pass away. In history, haven't we seen this? I think one of you sent me an article about a cryptocurrency billionaire. Overnight, lost billions. We have seen in history, during partition time, India, Pakistan, people who were wealthy and landlords overnight, they're on the streets. We've seen in Europe, wealthy communities due to war. We never would have conceived it. Only after years do you realize it is a possibility. Not just wealth, party, good times, company, friends. Our friends there, they're definitely there in the good times. You open a bottle of champagne, a bottle of wine, there are friends around. Where there's wealth, you'll have company. But when you're not feeling well, when you're ill, so how do you deal with that change? When you're famous, when you're at the top of your game, sport, people are appreciating, something negative gets released in the press, you lose that fame or you lose your performance. How do you deal with that change? It can happen overnight. How do you deal with it? This king of Persia keeps on reminding himself, and this is the philosophy. In good times and in bad times. Now, usually we turn philosophical when something negative happens. there's a loss and we go, oh, there's more to life than this. We've got to remind ourselves the time to take out that insurance, the time to do the premium is not when the accident is happening, but before the accident. In the good times, that's when we need to prepare ourselves. If this was to happen to me, how would I deal with it? Do you want it to happen to you? Of course not. Is it possible that it could happen to you? Yes. Therefore, understand the nature of the world, prepare for it. And number two, like the king of Persia, what should we do? Even this shall pass away. What should we do?
Practice acceptance of everything.
Practice acceptance.
Of everything, the good and the bad.
Yes. Because that's what will happen. Something else. No, why are you resisting life? Why are you resisting the nature of the world? It's foolishness. It's ignorance that you resist it. It is the nature of it. It will be what it is. It's like you're coming out during monsoon. Monsoon is when it rains and rains and rains, and you're coming out every day without an umbrella, expecting something different. Understand, assess, it's monsoon, put a raincoat on. Similarly, world is changing, be prepared for change. But what is the flip side of it? Okay, how do you be prepared for change? So I'm asking questions, not to test you. But when I draw it out of you, then we remember it. This is how we get the reflection process going. The word educate comes from two Latin words, educare, which means to draw out. So I'm asking you, what's the flip side of preparing, assessing, understanding, accepting change?
Isn't it also a bit about being mindful and thankful when you have the good times, but always in the constant awareness that it can change tomorrow?
Excellent. Yes. So I actually didn't think about this point. This is a great point. Just being grateful of what you do have, because any moment it could go. It could be lost. Yes.
And the reverse. If you are facing a major challenge, not to be weighed down and devastated, because even this shall pass away.
That's it. So just to rephrase that, don't get attached to anything. Because if you get attached to anything, positive or negative, to a person, a situation, or a place, when it changes, you're going to suffer. And it has to change. It's a question of time. But we're getting attached, hoping and wanting and trying to control it and keep it exactly the way we like it. That's not life. It's going to disappoint you. Our children will grow, will have their particular natures. Understand that they must pass. Don't get too attached. All the love, all the care is there. Don't get dependent on them. Don't get dependent on wealth. Not that you don't use it wisely, but don't be attached to it. So it's almost as if you run through the things in your life and ask yourself, would I be okay without them? Now, perhaps we've been introduced to the subject a little bit later in our lives. We have very strong attachments. They are, the Bhagavad Gita calls them wombs of sorrow. It's going to give us sorrow at some point. Okay, you can do something about it. Try and mitigate, try and lessen the detachment. Become less dependent. It does not mean diminishing, reducing your love. In fact, the love increases because you're reducing your dependence, your selfishness on that person or object. It'll be a better relationship. So one is acceptance. There's a nice quote by Robert Frost. I'll put it up for you, but it's so short. He says this: in 3 words, I can sum up everything I've learned about life. It goes on. So the same thing about negative things. Don't get attached to negativity. Getting attached to your disease or illness or a bad time, a bad rut, because then you miss the opportunity of something good happening, of the good things that are still going on in your life. Don't get attached to that either. That must also pass. So you see life as this constant procession of changing joy and sorrow, heat and cold. So when joy visits you, don't get too excited. Say, joy, hello, welcome. Glad you can visit. You're most welcome here. Stay as long as you'd like. But you understand, behind him, sorrow is coming. Don't get attached to sorrow either. He's just a visitor as well. Joy, sorrow, 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 sorrow. Then joy, 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 joy. Yeah, great times. It's a good phase in life. Then there's sorrow, 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 sorrow. It's okay. Joy is coming. Don't get attached to either. If we have, so this is the first phase, just understanding both sides of life, the changing nature of life. Now, let's take it up a notch. Let us use the parts that we don't like, the parts that we find difficult when that change happens. Understand it as life's way of helping us evolve, improve, taking our game to the next level. It's like competition. If you always get what you like, if you play at your level, there's no room for evolution, for improvement. Doesn't a good government need a strong opposition to perform better? Doesn't a sports person need good competition to up the game? Technology to find better ways of serving its customers? Imagine if we could take life as a sportsman. Siddhant, sometimes we get challenges, they knock us down. Applaud. Life, good shot. That was a nice one. I didn't see it coming. Excellent. What? They hit a winner against you. Okay, that was a good shot, life, but I'll be ready for the next one. So you're taking it almost as a game. Like, okay, life, let's see what you got next. What's coming? What's coming? It's possible. Understand that the nature of life, perhaps, is it is sometimes cruel only to be kind. If we don't have these challenges, how will we improve? How will we want to be better? Dr. David Starr Jordan, and this is an extract from the Vedanta Treatise. He's an evolutionist, and what he says is, the most evolved society or group of people must show the most imperfection. And what he means is a dynamic society is never static. So if they show perfection, it means that they're not growing. So they're constantly showing or bringing up imperfection and then striving to correct it. And as they correct it, the next imperfection comes up. And as they correct that, the next imperfection comes up until you actually get to perfection, enlightenment, self-realization. We've got to approach it the same way. As we start working on ourselves, we start seeing so many areas where our mind is taking over our personality. Okay, fine. We start bringing in our intellect. And no doubt we see an improvement. We're more available in conversations. We're thinking before we relate. Our relationships are getting better. So we're evolving. But as you evolve and the intellect gets sharper, it starts seeing much more detail. So you find so many more things to perfect and improve. And this is it. This is the evolution. It's a good thing. It's positive. It's like if you have a tablecloth that has got many stains, you don't notice the one stain. But if it's got few stains, you notice those few stains. And if it's just got one dot, it's a tiny dot on a plain white tablecloth, it stands out. It stands out because of the contrast of perfection. So that perfection shows the imperfection out more. This is the idea. And this is life. Use it. Use it to grow. In India, we have these knife wallahs where they come through the streets and they'll be shouting. Sometimes they play a particular tune on a flute, and the householders know that this is the guy who comes on his bicycle with a grindstone and he's there to sharpen knives. Okay? You've had this in Pune? Vasu, in Johannesburg, it doesn't happen. Debbie, Belgrade, you don't have anyone coming screaming outside your door, asking you for sharpening the knives. He's screaming for something else. So he comes with the knives, and the householders bring their kitchen knives to this person, and he's turning this grindstone. And he's so skillful, the way he turns the grindstone, which is rough and rugged and sharp, like the world. It's rough and rugged. These are the challenges. But because of his skill in contacting and placing the blade on the grindstone, he sharpens the knife. But if you don't have the technique, you can blunt and ruin the knife. Similarly, let us work on our technique, our intellect, to meet life in such a way that instead of it overwhelming us, instead of it making us succumb, that it makes us evolve, that it improves our game, our skill. There are two forces at work in how we meet the world, how we relate to the world. The first is heredity. So we are given certain skills from birth itself. It's passed down. Now you find with animals, this force is very strong. So an animal almost at birth itself gets most of the skills it requires for survival through heredity, and it picks up. So a lot of it's programmed. They know how to mate, they pick up hunting, etc. It's picked up. In fact, if you compare a pup to a baby, so a puppy, far, far more intelligent than the baby. Baby is dumb, doesn't even know when or where to move towards the mother to feed. A pup knows. It goes looking for the milk. But this is the edge that human beings have. They have the ability to adapt and readapt. And this constant adaptation, readaptation is why we're able to adjust and adapt to the world so quickly. But at some point we stop. We don't keep on developing this technique of adapting, readapting. We take things for granted. And with animals, their skills only go up to a particular point. Their adaptation or readaptation is limited. So they can change their environment to a certain extent. So you find birds flying thousands of kilometers to change their environment, adjust, adapt for better temperatures. We find some creatures hibernating when the climate is not convenient for them. As human beings, we can change the climate to suit us. We can have heating in cold places. We can have air conditioning and cooling in warm places. This is the beauty of a human being. So we're doing it for our comforts. Can we do it for our mental peace? So we do it for our physical comfort. Can we do it so that we don't get agitated? We can. And it depends where you place your anchor, where you place your dependence. So if you place your dependence on your body, you might do all sorts of things to keep your body healthy. Yoga, good diet, strength training. You may do all of that, but the body must age, the body must decay. The body might pick up an illness, a virus, a flu. And if you're dependent on the body and you go through that, you're completely devastated. Or you meet with an accident. Why? Because you place your dependence, your happiness on the body. If you place your dependence, happiness on your mind, your emotions, that's probably a setup for more disappointment, because the mind fluctuates far, far more than the body. The emotions, even during the scope of a day, changes so much. So at one time, when your mind is ecstatic, energetic, it is on a high. When your mind is not cooperating with you, you're in a low. It is possible. If you place it on something higher. Intellect, if you place it on your intellect, you're far, far more stable. There are less things that topple your happiness. But if someone disagrees with your point of view, if someone disagrees with your political belief, if someone disagrees with your philosophy, suppose you try and convince a friend about the benefits of Vedanta. Vedanta? Please don't come to me with this Eastern stuff. I don't want any of it. You feel hurt. You've placed your dependence on the philosophy. Don't place your dependence there. The only reliable part that you can place your happiness or dependence on is something that is changeless. What is that? The self. The inner self, spirit, God within. If you place your dependence, your identity on that, you find peace. So your intellect, no doubt, can make the most out of situations that you don't like, out of challenges. It can make it into opportunities to grow. It can look at it differently to make it something positive. But you're making the most out of a difficult situation. But to have peace in and through everything, you've got to anchor yourself to something deeper, something that doesn't change. So the deeper you go within yourself, the less changes. Go as deep as you can. Deep feelings don't change. Deep thoughts and convictions, they don't change. Maybe they change. Suppose you study and you find knowledge that changes your whole perception. It's possible. So go deeper than that. Hit the changeless factor. Eternal peace. What is the purpose of this discussion today? It is this. Last week, we discussed about the individual. This week, we're analyzing the world. If we look at most of our efforts and exertions, we're trying to fine-tune the world around us. Make it as comfortable as possible. Make it meet as much or as many of our likes as possible. What is the problem with that?
It's inevitably transient.
It's transient. Okay, so you would like your parents to be comfortable, you would like your children to be settled, and you put the measures and you put the efforts into place to do that. Okay, but the world must change. Understand this. It is the nature of the world. Whilst we try to do that, create this conducive environment around us, try to perfect our environment, let us also correct ourselves. Rumi, great thinker, he puts it like this. Instead of correcting the world, correct yourself. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. And you can make great strides, great achievements, but whatever you achieve, the world will change again. Today I am wise, so I'm changing myself. That is in your control. Well, Wayne Dyer, he says, you can't always control what goes on outside, but you can always control what goes on inside. So understand, at least for our peace and our happiness, there is a limit in what we can do in the world to give us peace and happiness. And if you place your dependence on the world, it has to disappoint you at some point. Instead of that, place the happiness within, in how you relate, how you look at the world, and ultimately within the self. The course of life is, if you stop moving, stop acting, stop improving, you start dying. We see this with muscles. If you don't use the muscle, it atrophies. My brother, he was a gymnast in his school days. He went to national level. And after school, he joined the academy. And whilst he did yoga and he did the sports, there were certain muscles and certain routines and trainings that he would exercise when he was doing his gymnastics that he wasn't doing in the academy. And those muscles just became rock hard. He wasn't using them. Same thing at the mental and the intellectual level. The number one reason for aging, going senile, is retirement. We don't realize the activity, both physical, mental, and intellectual, keeps us going, keeps us active. The moment you stop doing something, you can't do it again. In India especially, we have, those who can afford have drivers because of the convenience for parking, because of traffic, etc. Now, you may have a driver, you may have a chauffeur, and no doubt it's a convenience. But people in the 40s, because of this convenience, forgetting, not knowing how to drive, being dependent on others. Don't lose that skill, don't lose that art. How? Now and then, tell the chauffeur, he sits in the back, you drive the chauffeur. Keep it going. Jogging, yoga, fitness, taking the stairs. The moment you stop doing it and you're saying, look, I'm too old for this, it goes. I think most of you know Swamiji was playing cricket until 92. He had an injury, I think it was at 86, where the cricket ball, which is quite hard, he was bowling, the cricket ball hit him in the mouth. Full-blooded shot. So the ball was hit at full speed. There was no time to react, and it hit him here. And when he looked down, he saw a couple of teeth in his hands. His shirt was going red, and he was cool about it. He walked off, got treated, ended up having 52 stitches. I remember seeing Swamiji the next day. It was so swollen and I had to drink from a straw. It was cool, lighthearted. Even when we came, he called us. He was watching the television. He called us. And he said, and all of us were very quiet. We didn't want to disturb Swamiji. It must be in so much of pain. He's calling us. And then when we came close, he's opening out to show us the stitches. He's making us laugh. He's in so much pain. He's feeling empathetic of our discomfort, of seeing him in pain. Incredible. This is less attachment, no attachment to the body. There was pain, no doubt, but you don't have to be miserable about it. But the point I was getting was, when he went to see the doctor said, this is the oldest sports injury I've ever treated. And Swamiji, hopefully now you will not return to the cricket field. And remember, this is the mouth. Swamiji is a speaker. He said, look, he tried to explain to the doctor, accidents happen. It's part of sports. It's a rare thing. I've been playing cricket for 60 years. And history shows months later, Swamiji was back on the cricket field. And in his first over back, he took a wicket, which means he got somebody out. So it was a bit of a sensation. But the thing was, he kept on playing until he couldn't, literally. So this is it. The moment you stop something, be careful. You won't be able to do it. This is the nature of life. So again, we're understanding the nature of the world. We stop acting, start dying. And that's why in the Upanishads, it says, there is no retirement. You must die with your full faculties, with your boots on. Go into death, whatever it is, with that full of life and living. Don't resign yourself to it. Why? Because that is the nature of life. You act, you keep moving. We see streams and rivers. We find places where there is decay, there's stagnation. Don't stagnate any aspect, even as we age. So we have to intelligently adjust, adapt, reduce according to our capacity, no doubt, but don't stop. Now, in this progress, or this march of progress, or this march of constant activity, what is the purpose of that activity? Of all activity? What is the point of human evolution?
Learning to adapt to life and what it brings.
Yes, for what?
To be happy.
To be happy. To be comfortable, happy. To be progressively more peaceful. So the idea is we learn how to adapt better to be more peaceful, not just adapt. We start having the foresight to understand things where they no longer presented as challenges to us. If we can show the different grades of intellect. The first grade of intellect, when it meets something that it doesn't like or is a challenge, it succumbs to the adversity. So the person goes into depression, it battles, it's defeated, deflated. The next level of intellect is where you battle, you strive, you work through it, and you overcome the adversity. You overcome the challenge, you get through. It was difficult, but you made it. The third grade of intellect is what we're discussing. You take it as a sportsman. You see the adversity as an opportunity. This is anti-fragility. It's where by the tension, by the stress, you actually become stronger. So you take in the challenge and say, look, it's been a long time. I'm so glad there is a challenge, because if there wasn't any challenge, I wouldn't be able to grow and improve. I'm so glad that I found somebody that's better than me in the market, producing better things, because I can learn from that person. To meet them and match them, great. Sees adversity as an opportunity. The highest grade of intellect is so sharp and understands the nature of things and beings that it doesn't see it as a challenge at all. It sees it just as life. It's not a tragedy, it's not a sorrow, it's just life. Oh, but this happened to me. I lost this and I lost that. Part of life. Sees it as just another part of the procession. Of course it must happen. I can't always have success after success after success. There may be a failure. It's okay. Of course, this person must pass away. You don't have this notion that every person in your family is going to live till 85. You have a realistic understanding of life and you're prepared for it. You don't see it as a challenge because you're prepared, completely prepared. You can get this not only when you're on your deathbed or you have a terminal illness. You can have this wisdom in the pink of health in your 20s. We have a colleague who displayed this. A friend of ours who did the 3-year course, went home, contracted cancer, and the way he handled that challenge, which ended up taking his life, was so majestic, was so inspirational that it became comforting to his family, to the extent where he was packing up his room so that his mother wouldn't have to do it later. He was choosing the coffin so his father would not be emotional and buy the most expensive one. These were the conversations he was having. And he was joking around with them also. He's saying, look, after I go, it's been a tough few months for all of you. All of you take a holiday. Take a break. What an individual in your 20s. I'm saying we can learn this. We can handle challenge, and we can handle the so-called negative parts of life that we dislike. We can handle it with more grace, composure, and perhaps even humor. Now, this is it. If we can reach that state where we can, even in the greatest of difficulties, maintain our peace and happiness, not be dependent on the world, this is evolution. And life throws us these challenges to up our game. There's a picture of one of the Hindu gods. His name is Lord Vishnu. And he's got 4 arms. It's all symbolic. There's no actual person like this. It's symbolic to represent nature, to represent life. So it shows in one hand, he holds a lotus. This represents self-realization. In the other hand, he holds a conch, Shankar. And the conch is the call to realization, happiness, which we're all seeking. Now, if you ignore the call to the lotus, to self-realization, what does nature do? What does life do? In the third hand, he holds a mace, the gada. And this mace knocks you. It gives you the knocks and shocks of life to wake us up to think, what am I doing? Where am I going? What is the point of all this? I just lost something, or this happened in my life. I met a gentleman this week here in Ananda who was doing very well, extremely healthy, was top in his profession, and was diagnosed with cancer. And he told me He said, in 1 year of having this disease, it has given me more wisdom and better understanding of the people in my family than 48 years. So he took the knock and shock of this news of being diagnosed with cancer and used it to evolve him, move closer towards happiness, peace. So even though he has it now, he's grateful for it. What a way of looking at it. Not everybody learns from these knocks and shocks. And that is the fourth hand. The fourth hand is called the chakra. He holds a disc sword. So it's like a frisbee with spikes. And this disc sword is the final blow, final destination. Means if you still don't change your ways, if you don't change your thinking, and with all these knocks and shocks, you don't up your game, you will succumb. Die, destroy yourself, different ways of it. This is represented in the four arms. So therefore, let us use these challenges to go introvert, turn within, see how we can correct and improve ourselves. It's not easy. The world is far easier to get instant pleasures from, but it doesn't last. That's the problem. So otherwise, I would say, look, let's go out and indulge. I invite all of you, let's party somewhere pretty. But the pleasure doesn't last. In fact, it diminishes. But this part of going within and finding that happiness here, while it is difficult and it sometimes requires so much patience, not getting frustrated with our lack of understanding and translation of knowledge into wisdom, it is sure. There is a verse in the Bhagavad Gita. It's chapter 18, verses 37 and 38, and it describes the different types of happiness. So I'll put it up for you. It says the worldly happiness, okay? And then there is the internal happiness within. The true happiness is like poison in the beginning. It's really difficult. You know, most of the time I'm advising everyone, wake up early in the morning, use that first hour, first half an hour of the day to develop yourself, some me time, some inside time. It is like poison in the beginning, not easy. Especially for those of you in Europe, joining us from Europe, we've got winter coming, not easy. It's poison in the beginning, but nectar in the end. False happiness, this is worldly pleasures, is like nectar in the beginning, but poison in the end. It is no doubt enchanting, it's intoxicating, but it will disappoint you, it will let you down. Ask any person who has the world, who has gone to the end of the world in terms of indulgence, whether it be sex or drugs or wealth or reputation or fame. Nobody has found it there. If they had, I would say it's worth the pursuit. Jim Carrey, he says, I wish that everyone could have wealth, fame. There we go. I think everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of, so they can see it's not the answer. So we look at the person next door and we think, wow, look at the lifestyle they're leading. We look at celebrities and we say, oh, it looks very attractive. But if you have a conversation behind closed doors in their private lives, that piece is missing. Find the missing piece, not P-I-E-C-E, peace, P-E-A-C-E. That's the piece we want. Find the missing piece. Where is that? Swami Ramatirtha says, iron and gold are good for buying iron and gold. That's it. Iron and gold, what are they good for? They can buy you iron and gold. What can wealth do? Wealth can buy you commodities, but it can't give you peace and happiness. Wealth can, right now, I'm using a laptop, I'm using a webcam. It can provide all that, but it can't give me peace. Okay, it can give you access to knowledge. It can't give you wisdom. Therefore, what can give you the peace? The knowledge of your inner self. It is that where the peace is. So our efforts, instead of trying to correct the world and trying to get this changing world to be still, use it to gain knowledge of your inner self. Now, this applies to gaining knowledge of the world, to gaining knowledge of your inner self. It applies to developing your intellect. It's the same format, which is number one. We didn't know about this because it's not taught. We had a lack of information. How do we overcome it? Right now, you're listening. All right, so you're receiving information, or perhaps you're reading the books, or you're listening to e-learning. So you're receiving information. This term in Sanskrit is called Shravana. It literally means listening, because this knowledge was communicated orally originally. Then came text, writing. Okay, so you might have the information, which quite a few have. I know some of you have been following for years. Michaela, Paresh, you've been following the subject for years. There's information, but there's lack of understanding. So we have the information, but we haven't fully digested it. We haven't fully become it. So for this stage, we need something called manana. It's like banana in terms of spelling, and you bring your mind in and it becomes manana. M-A-N-A-N-A, manana. See, when I make it ridiculous, you remember it. Mind banana, manana. It literally means reflection. And reflection means turning the information around, literally reflecting, bouncing it off, looking at it from different angles, different perspectives, until it sinks. But for that, what do you need to get the experience, to get the practice? So you've got the understanding. Okay, I understand what detachment truly is. I understand what the intellect is. I'm missing the last aspect of knowledge. Lack of experience. What do you need to know? What do you need to do to overcome lack of experience? It's called Nidhi Dhyasana. It's in the book, so don't worry. Chapter 3, Vedanta Treatise. It means contemplation, meditation. It means thinking about it so much that you become it. Same thing with the self. Your focus, so you gain the knowledge of the self, information, you reflect on it, and then you stay with it until it becomes you. This is with every knowledge. So the part that's missing, oh, there we go, a nice summary. There are 3 phases of ignorance. The first is lack of information. You overcome it with listening, reading. All right, your e-learning, your reading, these classes. Then there is lack of understanding. You overcome it with reflection, thinking, study. That is what we want the morning time to be for us. And then the last part is lack of experience. This is the consistency, the single pointed focus. If you stay with it, it becomes you. So it's no longer theory, it's no longer information, it is your experience. In this philosophy, there is no difference between theory and practice. Only when you practice it do you know it. So right now, most of us, we have knowledge of Vedanta. We haven't converted that knowledge into wisdom. We might have knowledge of nutrition, we might have knowledge of exercise. When you're practicing it, when you're living it, when it's no longer an effort, then you can say it's wisdom. It is digested, assimilated knowledge. But for that, the part that is missing in our curriculum, in our exercise, in our educational institutions around the world is a gap, a period for reflection. We're taking in so much of information, we're not digesting it. It's like eating. You're not digesting, you're going to throw it up, or it passes through. It doesn't have any benefit in your system. Digest it. Take in as much knowledge, work on it, let it simmer, let it reflect, let it become part of you, and then move. But you've got to be consistent. So in the academy, we actually have only 2 academic sessions in the day. You've got your morning after breakfast, and we got in the evening. There are only 2 sessions in this academic institution. And the rest of the time, we have other activities, but there's a focus, and the best time of the day, the early morning, is given to reflection. That is why, how much do you remember from school, from university? Nicola, I'm not sure what you studied. How much do you remember?
I studied law. I don't remember any of it. I remember languages from school.
Languages, because you probably have a distinct talent for it.
Yeah, I guess I'm good at it.
But because we took in so much information, and no doubt we regurgitated it for the exam, but there was not enough reflection time or process to digest it. And sometimes we don't even remember what subjects we studied. In chemistry, which types of chemistry did you study? It wasn't reflected on. So this is where education system needs to be overhauled. But that's another story. This internal overhaul. Whatever you read, keep some time for reflection. You're going book after book, podcast after podcast. Do you ever pause to say, what did I get from this session? Even now, we've just had a class. There has been so much content. What do I leave this class with? The nature of the world is change. Prepare for the change with your intellect. Be flexible enough to adapt, readapt. But if we want to find peace, anchor ourselves on the changeless part in life, which is ourself within. That's it. We continue next week.